Today, we're going to talk about balancing being a student athlete and hopefully prepping ourselves for, just first of all, just understand that some days are busier than others. That's just how it is. But this is kind of going to be your game plan to balance all the things together. It's not an easy road. Okay. First of all, it's not easy. It's not easy to want something so bad and not know and have a game plan behind how you're going to get there. It's not easy to balance, 1 week you may have like 5 tests that week and you have to sacrifice some of your practice time. So knowing what your priorities are, and we've talked about this in a former live, but knowing your priorities is the key. So if you can write down your top 5 priorities right now, what would they be? Would they be family? Would they be faith? Would they be social life? Would they be softball? Obviously, like we talk about softball, this is a whole coaching segment on how to balance things as a softball player. But maybe you play basketball, maybe you play other sports and you're like trying to practice, or balance practice for basketball and games for softball. What are your top 5 priorities? Because this is where we get stuck. Where we get overwhelmed when we don't have our priorities straight. And I will tell you that from personal experience. There are times today where I kind of have to re-look at, what are my priorities so that I can stay on track to what it is that I want to do. Because if I have like a tough decision to make and I have 3 things sitting in front of me, if I know my priorities straight up, that decision should be easy. Okay. That decision should be absolutely easy. So hopefully coming up with like what your top 5 priorities are would be key. And I actually asked someone that I care dearly about, and she's a current student athlete in college. I was like, okay, what are your priorities? And you're going to laugh. So this doesn't include everything, but like the first thing that came to mind for her as a student athlete in college was when she was going to eat. And I know that probably sounds crazy, but she goes, Ashley, if I don't plan when I'm going to eat food, I sometimes forget because I'm so busy and I don't eat. And as a student athlete, and student athletes in college, they're working out probably more than most athletes right now in high school and below, but they're working out like sometimes 6-hour days. And if you go a 6-hour day of working out, so you're working out physically and mentally by playing a sport, right? And you're not fueling yourself, you are setting yourself up for absolute failure. When it comes down to body, your body will fail on you. If you do not eat enough calories, if you do not eat enough carbs, if you do not eat enough protein, like they are educated in college. So as a college athlete, I will tell you, I was educated by a dietitian on how to make food a priority. And that is something that student athletes in college have to prioritize. They have to prioritize when they eat so that they can perform at their best. So for her, she was like, one of the things at the top of my list is food. And so I don't know if you guys take this seriously enough, but if you finish, let's say you have school until 3 and you have practice at 4, you should most definitely eat something between that time. I will tell you right now, there were some days where like mom forgot to pack me a snack between school and practice. This was like before I was in high school and like took care of that myself. But when that happened, my mom sometimes had to come into school and bring a snack for me because my mom took this very, very seriously for us, because if you're hungry going into practice, that's a problem. You should not be hungry. And does that mean you need to eat and stuff your face like 10 minutes before practice? Probably not. Like give yourself a good at least half hour to digest what the heck you just ate. But simple snacks are good, like crackers, peanut butter and jelly, fruit, vegetables. I love carrots and hummus. It's like one of my go-to signatures. That was like one of my prime ones. I used to make actually like tortilla wraps, and I'd put peanut butter and jelly in the tortilla and just like wrap it up, because that's something that can last, all day. I'll just put it in my lunch box and then make sure I eat it before practice. But food should be a priority. Okay. So when it comes down to it, you need to be able to know what your priorities are, and food should kind of be up there, because depending on what you eat and what you're eating, that could affect your performance. The next thing that she said is obviously like one of the most important things is your academics. Okay. So without having good grades, you can't play at a good school, at a good school. So if you want to play D1, D2, D3, NAIA, whatever it is, if you want to just be really good at school in high school or below that. So let's say you're in 7th grade. If you want to be a good student, you have to be a good student before you can be a good athlete, because unless you have a good GPA, you will not play. Does that make sense? So you have to take care of your academics. And I'm telling you right now, if you want to play at a high level, academics is one of the very first things that coaches will look for. So right now, I'll tell you at tournaments, like when an athlete, if an athlete has a lot of talent, but her GPA isn't very good, that athlete will be passed over to the next one who has the same amount of talent, but a better GPA. Because you have to think about it. You're not just going for your talent. You're going in order to be able to represent your program well. And with that comes being able to know how to be a good student. So that is probably what the top priority above athletics, and it should be, especially if you're an up and coming athlete. Your academics needs to be in check before you start taking over, or like, let's say you spend an evening where like you practice for 4 hours, but you only work on your school for an hour. I think there's an issue there. Okay. Because you need to be able to take care of your academics and know how you're going to do that before you can schedule all these crazy events. So think about that as a balancing act. If you want to be good at school, or if you want to be good at softball, you have to have your academics in check and in line. Okay. So I would say before you start planning all of your practice times, plan when you're going to study. Sometimes we wouldn't have practice till like 5 p.m. I would have to stay after school until practice. And I would use those 2 hours before practice to make sure I had my homework done and to make sure maybe I was getting ahead on some assignments so that I wouldn't have to worry about it later. Prioritizing school is something that I wish I would have actually taken a little more seriously and done better, because a lot of times I was up till 11 p.m. trying to finish homework and it just didn't work well for me. I wish that I would have had that in check before I got to college, because when I got to college, it was like a whole new ball game and it was crazy. So when it came down to, I got the insight from my good friend, but someone that I truly care about in the sport of softball. And what she said was she meets with her academic advisor every single week to talk about upcoming exams and projects and big things that are going on. So I know a lot of you aren't playing college softball yet, but who in your life can you sit down and talk about and prioritize? Okay, what should you be doing? When should you be studying? What type of free time do you have today on this subject? She says she meets with her advisor every week. So whoever this is in your life, who can be your advisor when it comes down to prioritizing things? For a lot of people, it's going to be your parents. Okay. Some of you, maybe some older siblings, maybe siblings that have gone through something similar. But I will tell you, I met with my academic advisor all the time. So her name was Tanya Foster. She was like my mom away from school or away from home. I love Tanya Foster to death. Every single week, I would hang out with Tanya and we'd sit in her office. And I also had a mentor, so someone else as well, to help prioritize when am I going to work on softball? When am I going to work on school? When am I going to eat food? And when am I going to have a social life? And those things are all so, so important as a student athlete. You have to have all the things. And I know some people are like, you have to sacrifice your social life to get the goals that you want. And yes, like your social life might be limited, but it's very important to have a social life. You guys know that. Getting away from the game, or even sometimes, I know you love your teammates, but when you're away from your teammates, maybe for a few hours, you can help like distract your mind from stopping thinking about the things that are kind of stressing you out. So if softball is ever stressing you out, maybe you have some other people that you can go hang out with, that you can actually interact with, that can take your mind off of softball for a second, or take your mind off of that crazy test that you didn't do well on for a second. So understand that having a relationship with people is so, so important outside of the game. Okay. And honestly, like so we talked about how food and a social life are important. Sometimes you can like blend the two together. So if you want to save some time, like maybe going out to dinner with some friends is like a way to get in both. So you have to be able to kind of figure out what works best for you. I always loved going to dinner with teammates. I know my friend who I talked to about this, she said she does the same thing. She likes to sit down with teammates, or just other friends that aren't even her teammates, and just talk about life, talk about things aside from the game, talk about, what you're doing this weekend. Like, it's good and important to have those conversations. And so being able to distract, your mind from different things is really, really crucial and important. Social life is important. So one of my coaches described this to me perfectly when it came down to balancing. And so it goes down to obviously know your priorities and know the order of your priorities. So if it's faith, if it's family, if it's athletics, academics, like know what order those are in for you. And that'll help you make decisions on how to balance things. So for example, I'm just going to say this, if you love softball a lot more than you like volleyball, and it's a toss up between, and I don't want to tell anybody how to do anything, but if your goal, let's say, is to play college softball one day, and you have a basketball practice and you're really good at basketball, and you have a game for softball and a practice for basketball on the same day, let's say you have a travel ball tournament coming up or something, it should be pretty easy to decide which one you should go to, right? Because if you want to play college softball, then the basketball game isn't as relevant. And I know, and this is hard because you've committed to both teams, but the basketball team should understand what your goals are. And that's sometimes where there's like this tension between, multi-sport athletes. It's like some coaches don't like it when you go to the other sport. And I completely understand that. I didn't even know I was going to go down this avenue. But my decisions to go to specific things started getting easier when I knew what my big time goal was. And so when I knew I wanted to play college softball, I knew that if I had a basketball game or even just practice or a tournament on the same day as a softball tournament, that made my decision pretty easy because softball was what I wanted. Basketball was a sport that I loved to play. I loved my teammates. I loved all the things that came with it. But I had to tell that coach up front, my goal is to play college softball. And if they didn't understand that, they don't have to understand it, but I would hope that they would understand me and what my goals are and would do things that would help make that happen. So, and I know there were some times where it was like a bigger basketball tournament than a softball tournament was. And sometimes I would go to basketball because let's say it's like a state tournament in basketball, and softball was just like a little close game, a game that was close by or something like that. Like, yeah, so sometimes maybe I did basketball, but knowing what your priorities are and what your mission is should help make decisions easier for you. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And if you have more questions about this, just let me know. I would love to answer some of your questions if you have any. But basically that's it. Just understand that you should have a social life. You should absolutely have a social life. If you think that you have to sacrifice all of your social life and all of your time with friends, then I don't believe in that. I think you need time away from the game. I think you need time away from school and hang out with people that maybe aren't in either of those. Or maybe some of them are school friends that don't play sports and don't quite understand, what life you've chosen. That sounds like just like a really deep thought, but it's true. But it's good to be able to hang out with people that don't play the sport. And that's something that helped me balance life as a student athlete, especially in college, was I loved hanging out with people who knew nothing about sports and that wouldn't want to just continue to talk about sports. Like I wanted to talk about other things that were going on at Purdue and things like that. So it's good to have that. So having a social life is important. Yes, your time having a social life might be limited. And some college athletes would tell you that things that they did outside of school or softball was Netflix. I mean, who doesn't love a good show on Netflix? Netflix a little bit. I will tell you, I prioritized Netflix in college. I would say it was on my priorities list, but it was lower. But occasionally I would say, I want to watch one 30-minute show today. And I would find time to make that happen. Sometimes it was in the middle of the day when that was the only time I had a break. Sometimes it was like right before bed, like whatever it was, I tried to like put it in there because I knew it was important for me to distract my mind as a student athlete. So just decide where you're going to put different things. So other things that you could do outside of the game, going to sporting events. So as an athlete at Purdue, I loved supporting my friends who played other sports. I would go to basketball games all the time, football, obviously, like weekend football, so much fun. That was a fall sport, so I didn't have to worry too much about that going on. We didn't normally practice on football game days either. So like I went to football games, I went to soccer games, I went to volleyball. Oh my gosh, our volleyball team was so fun to watch in college. Went to so many of those games. And I even talked to my sister about it. She loves going to sporting events too. So it's really, really crucial that you go do things outside of your own sport and go support some of your friends too. So other things that you can do, like obviously we talked about earlier, you can like combine your social and your actual eating habits. So you can like maybe go grab dinner with a friend, maybe go grab breakfast with a friend. Like find a way to get outside the game and just do things that don't remind you of school or softball. So I know that doesn't exactly help you balance school or softball, but I hope you understand it's not just those two. It's also like your social life should be up there. You should figure out, obviously your social life's going to be a little smaller than the amount of time you put in school or softball, but you got to put that in there. Like I'm stressing that today. Be able to put in some social life because it's necessary. Now, does that mean that you're going to skip a tournament to hang out with friends? Probably not, because your goal is softball, right? Your goal is to be really good at this game. And if you have a tournament scheduled, that is your priority. Okay. That was one of the hardest things for me to grow up with, is having friends that don't play the game that sometimes didn't always understand that I had softball tournaments every weekend in the summer. This summer is obviously different because of a pandemic we're living in, but it's not always going to be the same. Okay. Whatever season of life you're in, understand that your priorities and the balancing act is going to change, but keep your priorities in line. I hope that's like one of the main things that you take away from today. You have to know your priorities. You have to know what comes before what, so it can help you make decisions throughout the day. It's going to help you make, that decision of whether you should study for an hour or go hang out with friends in the backyard for an hour. Where are you at in school? What are your grades like right now? Like, are you passing with flying colors and you're just like, okay, like I'm crushing this. I have a really good feel for this. Then maybe you can have time to go hang out with other people. But if you're struggling with school right now, then make sure that you know that you probably shouldn't be hanging out with friends when you're struggling with school. And I know this is something that like, it makes sense as I'm saying it, but I hope that you guys take this into reality. Like if you're crushing it in school and you're not crushing it in softball, then that spare time that you have should probably be spent a little more on softball. And vice versa. If you're crushing softball and school's kind of not going great for you, maybe we got to limit our time practicing and doing other things with softball and work on trying to get those grades up. Okay. So if there is a way to do it, but I don't want you to say that whatever you decide is going to be your balancing act right now has to stick with you forever. It totally doesn't. But I hope you guys understand that there's a way to find that balance in every season of life. And so right now, just analyze where your feet are right now. And I know a lot of you aren't in school right now, okay? But when you are, understand how is school going for you right now? On like, let's grade it. Let's do a grading scale. How are you doing in school? That needs to be probably one of the first things that you figure out. If you're crushing it, then maybe you have some more time to play softball. And now if you're not, maybe you should use that time to get back up there with your grades. Okay. And you will find it, as long as you're trying to find the balancing act of, if I'm not good at one thing, I'm not good at one thing and I'm better at another, like trying to figure out how you can get them pretty close. Because it comes down to like, think about like a bell curve, like this that I drew right here. You never want to be too low and you never want to be too high. You always want to, well, that's not what I want to say. This is too low and this is too high. You always want to try to find the middle ground in everything. Okay. So that's the middle ground. That's the highest point. And we talk about sports in that way too. So like when you're playing, we've talked about this in the mental game, like you don't want to be too excited or too not excited. You want to be like right in the middle, because that's where you're going to be at peak performance. Well, peak performance comes with everything, with sports, with school, with whatever, like your eating habits even. So finding the balance is everything. So when it comes down to it, it's trial and error. It's seeing what things work well for you and what things don't. Okay. And so if you're not in a place right now where you feel like you have that balance, I want you to try new things. I want you to try to see how can you do things maybe a little bit different one day, and take note of how things are going that day for you. That's how the balancing act works. It's like when things go really, really, really well in whatever realm you're talking about, softball or school or whatever. When things are going really, really well, analyze why it's happening like that. Analyze what did I wake up and eat that morning? How much time was I studying? How much time was I working on my game? Like if you can put down and write down your ideal perfect day, one that's happened for you before, our goal now should become to create that again. Okay. That's what we want. We want to create the good days and have more good days than we do bad, right? So as long as we learn from the bad days and take note of the good days, and know what went into those good days, we will have more good days, and we will be able to balance, school, softball, XYZ, social life, like all the things that are going on. So that's the key behind this whole session, is finding the balance. Okay. So remember, and if you have to write down this bell curve, I recommend that you do. So basically, but you write like a little L right here. So this is high, or this is, I guess we could say, because like I normally do this bell curve with like sports and with like mental game, like are you too excited or not? But basically, like, let's think of this bell curve right here as these are the bad days, or these are the, how do I think about it? Okay, I did not plan on talking about this. So like, let's say this is a really low day and this is like a really, really high day, but you want to like kind of find like the middle ground and like, how can I have like a balance of each of all the things? And that if that's what you want, think about what went into like a really, really, really good day for you. What like clicked that day? You were probably on time to everything. You were probably eating well. You were probably just like on point in your flow state. Amazing. Write down what happened that day for you. Now, on the bad days, think of like a really bad day you might have had. Maybe it was this weekend. Maybe you played not great this weekend. Go over what went into that bad day and analyze, okay, what did I eat that morning? Was I on time to things? What was my headspace like? Was I confident in myself? If not, take the confident day, take the not confident day, and see what's working. Okay. And take what didn't go well. Take what didn't go well that one day and write down, why was it not great? And then write down, I learned because this didn't work out. This is what I'm going to do different next time. That should be the whole plan behind your life, is analyzing and just making constant corrections, because constant corrections are what's going to lead to your overall success. Okay. So as long as you're making corrections all the time, and as long as you're writing down the things that are working, you're going to be able to figure this out. But remember, know what your priorities are. That's what it's going to take to have more of a balanced lifestyle for you. Okay. I'm honestly preaching this right now because I'm not in a state where I feel like I have balance. And I've been taught these things. Like, my college athlete experience taught me these things, and I still have to make sure I'm focusing on it. So give yourself some grace. Maybe right now you feel like you're crushing it. Okay. Take note of what it's like to crush it. Because maybe next week or in a month, you're like, oh, I'm not crushing it right now. What was I doing when I was crushing it?